everyone. Welcome back to the RTS podcast. I'm Mike Tushir. I've got Adam and Polly here with me today, and today is just going to be the three of us, three RTS coaches. We're going to sit around and chat a little bit about RPE. Clearly, RPE is a tool that we use a lot in reactive training systems. It's something that we find very valuable. So we want to talk about that as a tool, and as we all know, that there's no tool that can do it all. So we want to talk about how is this tool useful and how's it maybe not useful. So I guess, guys, before we get into this, let's go ahead and lay some groundwork. If anybody listening is not familiar with RPE, what is RPE? What is RPE as a concept? So RPE stands for rate of perceived exertion. We use a scale of 1 to 10, and really we kind of concentrate on the numbers 6 through 10, and it's just it's a rating of how hard did it feel. And I don't mean how hard did it feel on your feelings. It's not an emotional thing. It's a performance. It's a performance assessment. So one way that we look at RPE is reps in the tank. So a 10 RPE is a maximum effort, as hard as you can go. No reps left in the tank. A 9 RPE would be I could have done one more if I had to. An 8 RPE is I could have done 2 more reps if I needed to, and so on. So that's kind of the basics of what RPE is, and if that's maybe not enough of a primer for you, I really encourage you to go to reactivetrainingsystems.com, look at our article section, in particular the beginning RTS article section. There's quite a few articles that we have that cover what RPE is, how to use it, and so on. So anyway, enough of a RPE intro from me, guys. Clearly, we all use RPE in the training that we write and in our own training. So do you guys have any thoughts that you want to start off with before we kind of get into some of these other questions?
Yeah. One of the comments I made is that RPE uniquely prepares powerlifters and weightlifters specifically for the act of being in a competition, and it allows you, especially if you don't have a coach or even a handler, to kind of go back, reassess, what you're doing on each attempt, and make accurate, well-educated adjustments on your attempt selection in competition. I think it's probably one of the best tools to prepare a lifter to succeed in a powerlifting meet.
Yeah, speaking on that, I feel like it creates a good common language for lifter and coach, and lifter to communicate. Just coming off of coaching in a meet this weekend, we had lifters that I had coached that I don't directly work with, and lifters that we coach that we directly work with, and all of them have trained under RTS and trained under using RPEs, and everybody did really well, and we're able to clearly communicate RPEs and how they're feeling, and just once again, like Mike said, Mike, how you're feeling from a more from a lifting point of view, not an emotional point of view. We try to take as much of that out as we can.
Right. The common language thing is big, and especially in a contest setting, it's big. So if I come off of the platform and say, it was an 8 RPE, well, we know that we want your opener to be more like a 7.5, and so if it's an 8, then not only do I know how hard that felt to you, that allows us to adjust our game plan a little bit, and we're not kind of relying on more ambiguous terms like, oh, that felt a little harder than it should. Well, okay, so what does that mean? A little harder than it should? Is that, give me something I can work with here, So, clearly people have competed at a high level and done so successfully before, attaching a numerical rating to their level of effort. But I think it makes that process a little bit easier. And then, if we go back to the beginnings, where RPE came from in the beginning was really to teach intermediate lifters how to think and act more like advanced lifters. It's something that people who've been under the bar for a long time kind of do naturally. They adjust their weights based on how the bar is moving. They're observant of effort and bar speed and things like that. So they're automatically taking this stuff into account. So it's an effort to teach your more intermediate lifters how to do that, and even some of the advanced lifters, it's to kind of build a system around it. So anyway, yeah, so that's definitely some of the pros of RPE-based training. Like I mentioned in the beginning, all tools have operational limits. There's always a limit to its usefulness. So in your view, what do you see as some of the operational limits for RPE training? Well, I can go ahead and start off. Yeah, so some of the operational limits that I see, especially in a training context, is when we get to very low RPEs, it gets really hard to determine those accurately. So I said that we really focus on, the 6 through 10 end of the scale. But even when you get more around like 7 RPEs, it gets kind of fuzzy, So a 7 RPE is something that moves pretty fast, and depending on the kind of lifter you are, you might have anywhere from 3 to 5 reps in the tank, and it gets hard to determine with a concrete level of certainty. I'm at a 7 RPE versus I'm at a 7.5 RPE or a 6 RPE or something like that. So there gets to be this little bit of fuzziness down on that end of the spectrum. So if you're working with very low RPEs, it can be difficult to use even for an experienced lifter, a lifter who's experienced using RPEs.
I agree with that. From the standpoint of, let's say you were working with a weight that's like a 6 RPE for a set of 4, and you know that from experience, if you sat there with the weight for a couple, 5 to 10 seconds in between reps, you could probably crank out many more than you would have previously thought just from that little bit of recovery. I've kind of done that, I think.
Yeah.
So, like you said, it can be inaccurate, but certainly I think when you get to the 8 to 9 RPE, it gets pretty damn close.
Sure, and you can dial it in. And the neat thing with that is that when is RPE more important? If you've got like really, really low RPE sets programmed into your training, is it critical that weight adjusts up or down based on like that day's actual performance? From what I see, like a normal performance variation is like a 5% swing in your day-to-day performance is a pretty big swing. It's not unheard of, but that's a pretty big swing. Now, if we're talking about, doing, let's say, doubles with 80%, then that's pretty low RPE. That's going to put you down around that 6 RPE range, I would estimate, just off the top of my head. And does it really matter if you come in and you're 5% weaker that day? Okay, so now instead of it being a 6 RPE, it's a 7 RPE. You're not at risk of missing weights when you're operating on that lower end of the RPE scale. So using a different tool is maybe easier to use, and maybe it gets you close enough. So that's something that I know that we do when we're programming stuff that we want a lifter working at the lower end of the RPE scale. We're not regulating the bar weight based on RPE at that point. Now, like what you were saying, when we're working on that higher end, which is actually most of the time, most of the time we're at 8 RPE and above. And if we're working on that end of the scale, then yeah, RPE is fairly accurate, especially if you get a little experience with it, and you shouldn't have a problem using it.
Yeah, I would agree. A lot of times when we're working down in the 6 and 7 RPE range, that'll usually be predetermined a little bit, especially if we've got say an 8 or a 9 in there as well. So we'll calculate our estimated 1 RM, and then we'll kind of regress from there to kind of set a target for say 6 or 7 RPE, and that's kind of say outside the bullseye, and then with say a 9 RPE being the center of the bullseye where we try to dial it in, but that at least gets us in the field.
Yeah.
So the 6 and 7 is kind of to get you kind of you're somewhere in the outfield, and as you kind of zone in, you get closer and closer to home plate. So if that's a good baseball analogy or not, but
No, I get what you're saying, and I totally
yeah,
agree with that. Like those workup sets, a lot of times those will be lower RPE, but that's not a big deal. At least from where I sit, it doesn't seem to be a big deal.
well, because you're pushing to a bigger end. So if you had to end at a 6 RPE, we don't really do that.
Yeah.
But usually a 6 RPE is just to establish a base, and also it's kind of, to me, from a coaching standpoint, it's an early indicator just to see how the lifter is doing. So I can talk about from both points of view, as a lifter and as a coach. If the 6 RPE feels real funky, then I'm going to start thinking about making adjustments. But if it's usually business as usual until you get into, say, pushing into the 8, 9 RPE range.
Yeah. Yeah. And that kind of leads into one of the big benefits of using this style of training is that by working up, like you're saying, let's say our target weight is a 9 RPE for that day. By working up, we're able to see what our performance is and assess our performance with a relatively good amount of accuracy. And then we can dial that weight in to really get at the weight that we want, on that top end set. So if you're having a good day, and hopefully you are, training is supposed to be effective and make you stronger, so hopefully it leads to good training days, right? So if you're having a good day, then you'll see that on the way up. You'll see that weights are moving well, that things seem a little bit light, so you can take a little bit bigger jump and maybe set a PR. And then, of course, there's the opposite end. If you're having a bad day, things are moving heavy, things are a little bit weird in those workup sets, so we'll dial things down a little bit. And then that's where the auto-regulation effect comes from. The weight on the bar automatically adjusts up or down so that you get exactly the amount of weight that you should be using for that day. And this is something that coaches and systems all over the world, pretty much every successful system that I've come across ever for powerlifting has used auto-regulation. Maybe not necessarily RPE as a tool, but a lot of them use a coach's eye. The coach, who's an experienced coach, is standing there watching the lifter, and they see, hey, you don't have it today, so we're going to reduce the weights. Or things are going great today, things are moving really well, so we're going to increase the weights. So the coach is providing that sort of auto-regulated effect. Now, for most of us, I know when I was coming up through the powerlifting ranks, and even now, a lot of times I'm training by myself. So you don't have that. You don't have somebody else standing there watching you, adjusting your weights for you. And even if you do have a coach, are they like an experienced top-level national coach? For almost all of us, no, they're not. So having some sort of system in place that provides that auto-regulated effect, I think, is really useful.
Yeah, and I would take that back to, once again, our experience at the meet, where it culminated at the end of a large training block, where we took the opportunity to we moved certain lifters up, we moved certain lifters down, and really kind of dialed them all in so that they could have the best meet that they possibly could. Many of our lifters went 9 for 9 with PRs across the board, all white lights, and that's just, I think that's a testament to RPEs and just a trained eye also in making the appropriate adjustments and not being stuck on say hard numbers.
Yeah.
So
that takes a lot of discipline, and it is I think it can be really difficult for a lifter who needs to be constantly motivated or needs to get fired up in training to have that discipline to choose their numbers effectively. And that's probably, I think, one of the biggest challenges with it is, like we were talking about earlier, it's easy to mess it up. It's easy to go with it. It's also easy to undershoot as well.
Yeah. And that's one of the things that I mention from time to time, is that I don't think it's a tool for everybody. I know way back when I wrote the RTS manual and we were talking about RPE, who's this method for, I said this method is for people who I would call controlled aggressive. You've got to have a little bit of a forward lean to the way that you lift weights. Your natural tendency has to be, let me try it. Let me try something. Put a weight on the bar. Let me go after it a little bit. But you've also, like you were saying, Adam, you've got to have a little bit of discipline. You've got to be able to say, actually, I don't have it today, so I'm going to, adjust my plan accordingly. So yeah, there has to be that disciplined mindset. And if you don't, no, I don't think most powerlifters have the problem of, needing to be dragged to the gym, and maybe I'm wrong on that, but it seems like most of us want to be in the gym and want to lift weights. Otherwise, why would you be a powerlifter? So I don't think that's usually the problem, but I do see a problem a lot of people who, they'll grind out a nasty lift, and you'll say, what was the RPE on that? Thinking it was definitely a 9.5, 10 RPE, and they'll go, that was an 8. No, it was not an 8, Like, you've got to be able to be honest with yourself,
And I think that gets evidenced in training as well, especially when we have drop sets, repeat sets programmed afterwards. And to me, if people hit their RPEs properly, they'll be able to properly execute their repeats and their drops in training. And if they don't, then they're kind of spent after their 9, which is actually, a 15 or a 16 or whatever it is, just like way off the charts, and just kind of there's no reason for that lift to have ever been executed. Early on, what's that?
The 15 or 16 qualifies them as dead.
Yeah, pretty close to it. I think someone had an RPE scale up like that. But we, early on in training cycles, I will implement technical failure as the rule before a physical failure, because people can kind of push themselves and they can deceive themselves, but it's pretty non-negotiable when somebody's form breaks down pretty quickly. And then we use that to kind of base the 9, and then as we get closer into a meet, or we're getting deeper into a cycle, that's where we'll change over to just kind of let people really feel it out a little bit more.
Yeah. I want to shift gears just a little bit. I want to talk a little bit about what was it like for you guys transitioning to an RPE-based system, and how did you go about developing that skill of assessing your RPE? It's probably a little bit more recent memory for you guys than for me.
So for me, I'd say I had always trained percentages, and I consider myself to have gone from being a novice lifter to an intermediate advanced lifter, pretty quickly. A lot of that due to the way the training is structured, and just my ability to adapt. But for me, I'd been an athlete for a very long time before this, and I'd always been accustomed to listening to my body just from being a swimmer, knowing how I was feeling in the middle of a race. And so the transition for me was definitely easier. And even before that, when I was kind of doing just Olympic weightlifting and like CrossFit stuff, you always have to focus on what's your technique like, what are you, how does the weight feel, and that's not necessarily something that's taught in that environment, but it was something that I kind of picked up instinctively. So for me, I guess the answer is that it was a pretty easy transition.
Okay.
Yeah, I would say for me, it just came about when I was looking for something that can kind of account for kind of changes in my sleep patterns, changes in, just living in New York, living in Brooklyn, being under, it seems to be a little higher pressure here. Started to look for something for myself where, like, I didn't like the idea of being tied into hard percentages every day, kind of having those percentages being separated from what I was actually experiencing as a person and as a lifter. And I found RTS, and I started experimenting with RPEs on my own. Then I had hired Mike to coach me years ago, and started making some progress, and it made sense to me. And then as my gym grew, I would use it for my lifters, and I've seen my lifters make amazing progress because it really does allow for, say, if someone's coming in from not a lot of sleep, they're able to dial it back, and just kind of literally, as you always say, Mike, take what's there. So I have to say I'm still learning. I mean, I'm still for myself as a lifter. I still have to deal with my own ego. I still have to deal with, do I stop here, or do I just try for that? Do I try for that PR? Do I really? Is it because I want it, or because it's there? But I think experiencing that myself is a great reminder of what my lifters experience on a regular basis, and it creates a little bit more empathy as well.
Yeah, which is an important part of being a good coach too. Which, I don't know, that's a whole other topic, which would be something to be interesting to get into. I just will throw out there real quick a tool that I've used in the past to help lifters get better at RPE. What we'll encounter sometimes is someone will join RTS, and we'll start coaching them, and then come to find out they're just not that good at assessing their RPE. Video is super useful, and we have the Team RTS Facebook group, closed Facebook group for our people. Guys will post videos on the Facebook group, and ask for feedback on RPE. Hey, this is what I rated it. What do you guys think? And so that's a really useful tool for getting better at rating your own RPE when you're by yourself in training. You're getting that outside perspective. Other people are kind of letting you know what they think, which doesn't override, what your own perceptions are. But we should, take that feedback and help it to improve our skill. Another thing that we would do for people who are, just getting used to RPE is make sure that we're sticking to the higher end of the RPE scale. Lots of 9s, even some 10s, even up to quite a few 10 RPE sets. So you're doing a lot of rep maxes and stuff like that, and it's always more plain to see if you have a little bit left in the tank or not. And by doing that a little bit, you start to practice your RPE, you get a little bit better at it. You get better at it on those workup sets, and then gradually you can back off, how high of the RPE scale you're going. And then over time, you're training at a lower RPE, which as you advance, that tends to be more of what's needed anyway. Our younger lifters, our more novice lifters, can tolerate and benefit from that high RPE work a lot better. But through laying that groundwork, then later on, once they've developed this skill a bit more, we can back the RPE off. That allows us to push a little bit more volume. It helps them with their recovery. It helps them with technical perfection and stuff like that. So that's a tool that we've used in the past for helping people kind of develop that RPE skill.
Mike, I'd throw one more thing in there as well. I think it's important for, especially for novice lifters, to take time to calculate their estimated 1 rep max before they lift, because that'll give them, once again, going back to the target, it gives them a real target to shoot for, as opposed to, I've seen too many novice lifters come in and just be all over the map from one session to another, just because they're kind of guessing on what they think their RPE should be, and they're targeting it more towards what they want to hit rather than kind of having a little bit of a progression. And RPE is not just all about feelings. It's also, there's some science behind it, and calculating the estimated 1 rep max will really kind of help ground a novice lifter.
Yeah, that's a really good point, actually, and maybe something that doesn't get talked about enough is that having that estimated 1 rep max, or having that target weight that you're aiming at, allows you to basically just use RPE to make course corrections, which that's really auto-regulation's proper role anyway. There's no auto-regulating tool that I'm aware of that can do it all. That you just kind of go into it in the blind, and it's going to tell you what to do, and you just do it, and everything's wonderful. It just doesn't work like that. All auto-regulating tools work better if we start with a really, really good plan and then just use the auto-regulating mechanism to make course corrections to that plan. It helps keep you on track. If you start with a really good plan, we all know that life doesn't happen according to plan. So that things are going to happen to you, and things are going to get off track. And what these auto-regulating tools do is adjust the plan to help keep you on track when those things happen.
Absolutely.
So I think that's just about all the time that we've got to cover this topic. And like we were talking about, there's so much to talk about. There's a lot to cover. So maybe we'll come back and revisit this again at some point.
Yeah, this is for another time as well, I think, too.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely one of the keystone tools that we use in RTS, and there's a lot to it. But thanks, guys. Thanks, Adam. Thanks, Polly, for hanging out with me and chatting about RPEs today. And thanks, everybody, for watching. We'll see you guys next time.